Hi, welcome to episode 254 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy K on Ravelry, Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, which is where this episode and every episode show notes will be. I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where you can buy my handspun yarns. And we have a Ravelry group called The Corner of Knit and Tea. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, November 11th, which is Veterans Day in the United States, as well as Remembrance Day around the world. It is a day in which we honor those who have served for our country. So if you have served, thank you for your service. If you are the family member of someone who has served, thank you for being supportive of them. And if you are a veteran, I hope you are enjoying a wonderful day. I did decide to record slightly earlier in the afternoon. It is about between 3:30 and 4 o'clock, so it is not dark yet, and actually it is kind of sunny out today, which is nice. We have been a little bit on whiplash here in the Midwest. This past week it was around 20 degrees on Tuesday and Wednesday. It was 60 degrees on Saturday. It is 20 degrees and snowed this morning, although it's mostly just a light dusting here outside Kansas City. And it is 23 degrees, so it will warm up and maybe get up towards the 50s this coming weekend. All of this is, suffice it to say, that my allergies are acting up and I have been feeling a little under the weather. I don't really think I'm ill. It's mostly just been sinus pressure, and I find that as I age, I'm a little bit more sensitive to it. I think it's a combination of the temperature fluctuating back and forth, all the dead leaves falling off the trees right now, and then the inside recirculated air because we've started to crank on the heaters. So, and I had to crank up the heater this morning because it was 23 outside and in the low 60s inside, and I was shivering. So, and I'm already bundled up in knits. I am actually wearing hand knit socks and hand knit slippers, and then I am wearing my Porphyr cardigan, which I knit out of Miss Babs' Yowza several years ago for Nanny Swaymo. So let's get into the podcast. I am drinking today a tea from Tea Pigs, and I really, really like it. It is actually an herbal tea. It is fennel and licorice. And I know the black licorice is definitely an acquired taste, so I won't be offended that some of you won't like it. I actually find that both the fennel and the licorice soothe my throat, and I really like them when I'm not feeling 100%. And I add a little bit of honey, and one of the things that I really like about Tea Pigs teas is on the ingredients list, it says fennel 80%, licorice 20%, and that's it. They do this particular flavor comes in tea temples, and I know there is new research on whether those micro mesh bags have plastics in them. And so I've been thinking about that. I don't think this flavor is actually available loose. If it is, I will order it that way next time, but I have a feeling I ordered the tea bags rather than loose because they did not do this particular brand loose. So I'll have to reevaluate. I ordered 2 of these and each has 15 tea temples. So that's what they call them. They're just the little triangular bags. Anyway, so I'm gonna work my way through these and then make another decision. But just in case the question comes up, I am aware. I am drinking it in my Hershey's Pennsylvania mug, which is mostly just because it is a big mug and I pulled it out last night and had a cup of tea before bed, and it was by the sink, so I gave it a quick wash and started again today. So yeah, this is my fennel and licorice with, or licorice with a little bit of honey. So let's talk about the knits. November is Nanny Swaymo, and I actually did cast on my Nanny Swaymo sweater this week. I have a lot of samples and projects that I need to be working on right now, and actually I have some contract spinning, which I will talk about in a little bit. So most of my time at home is taken up with a bunch of projects, which I will show you today because I can show you all of them. And so the my Nanny Swaymo sweater is pretty much my take it out of the house, because none of the other projects, well, one of the other projects I can take out of the house, but the others are definitely home projects. So I did get to start the sweater this week, and I actually got fairly far. If you consider I knit it at knit night on Wednesday when I went out. I knit for about an hour with a friend on Saturday, and I knit for another hour or two with a friend on Sunday, and that's when this saw time. I also did a little bit in the car as we were running errands. The rows are really long right now. So I am knitting, and let's see if I can show you a picture of it. Because I did not print out the full pattern, because I didn't want to print, all the pictures, to be quite honest, but here's the closest I can give you. And this is a pretty simple cardigan. I am knitting sort of a little black sweater. This is called Night Out Cardigan by Joji Locatelli. And it is a very simple cardigan with 2 lace panels down the front, sort of where the button bands are. It is knit top-down raglan, and the button band is knit contiguously with the rest of the sweater. For the most part, I am sticking to almost everything the pattern suggests. I am knitting, the sweater is given in a large range of sizes and probably still growing because Joji is trying to revise her patterns to be more size inclusive. And the pattern is available in a range of sizes and suggests 1 to 2 inches of positive ease. My one problem with this sweater is that there was a size 38, which is my exact bust size, and then the next one up is a size 42, which would give me 4 inches of positive ease, which I thought was a little bit much. Mostly I want this little black cardigan to wear when I'm doing businessy things. I had a little black cardigan that I bought from just a regular commercial store. I think it was Macy's. That I wore to work all the time, with slacks and like a sweater or a shell underneath, and this is what I'm trying to replace. So I decided that it wouldn't really matter to me if it was just a little bit snug, but I really wouldn't like it if it was going to be 4 inches positive ease, because I felt like it was going to be a little bit oversized and look a little bit sloppy. I really wanted a more tailored fit. That said, I also looked at how I used to wear that little black sweater. Basically what happened is it kept getting holes in it, and it was machine knit, and it kept falling apart, and I repaired it several times and then decided, screw it, I'm going to knit myself one, which I think I've covered here before. And I never wore that cardigan buttoned. At most, I would button the bottom 1 button or 2 buttons if it were chilly, but for the most part, I wore it open without buttons. So I feel like even if the cardigan is a little bit snug and doesn't close perfectly over my bust, I still feel like it's going to be better at the size 38 than at the size 42. That said, I also decided to eliminate the buttons. I know you'll think me crazy here, but I just decided that since I never wore that cardigan buttoned, I did not want to go ahead and do buttonholes and buttons. And little thing, buttonholes and buttons are kind of some of my least favorite parts of sweaters. I find the buttonholes can sometimes be too loose if you don't kind of back them with a grosgrain ribbon and stabilize them. Then I have to sew buttons on, which is not my favorite thing either. And as I said, I almost never wore that cardigan buttoned. So my plan is to knit it without buttons. And if I need to, just purchase a clasp, like from Jewel Designs or Joann's or somewhere else, and just do like a hook and eye closure or a little toggle or something up top if I really want to. And that can always be added along with a button loop after. So this is what I am working on, and all of my modifications and decisions. And this is where I am at. I am, the yoke is divided into several parts, and I have just completed the second part of the yoke, and I would say I'm probably between 1/2 to 2/3 of the way done with the shoulder gusset. And like I said, this is a top-down raglan. It's knit back and forth because it is a top-down raglan cardigan, and so there's not a ton to show you at this point because it just kind of looks like a black blob, but here you go. This is one of the sides. You can see that I have the lace panel down the front. I am doing the garter stitch button band just with no buttonholes, and then the reason that I know I am sort of 1/2 to 2/3 of the way is based on other raglan sweaters that I have knit. I have a good idea of what the what length the raglan seam should be, and that's actually the diagonal going down. And between that and looking at how many more sections and rows I need to knit, I'm about 2/3 of the way done. So my rows are long at this point. I believe when I finished last night, I am at 347 stitches, and I am still going up to close to 500. So I still have a ways to go, and this is going to be a bit of a beast. I am working on US size 2 needles, and this is with Anzula, their Dreamy Base, which is a merino cashmere silk in the colorway black, and it is a lovely semi-solid black. I didn't want necessarily a completely flat black, but I also didn't want it to be too variegated. I really did not want a lot of white and other colors in there, and so I think that this one does it nicely. The yarn is really covered well, and there is a bit of variation and texture to make it interesting. I am alternating, so I have 2 balls going. And for my size, it anticipates it will take about between 1,400 and 1,500 yards, and I have well over 1,600. So I should not run out of yarn, knock balls together, but that is what I am working on. I don't expect it will see a ton of progress this week because, as I said, I can only do this when I leave the house. I do have to look at the chart still for the little bitty lace panel here, but there is so much knitting in between that. The lace panel is only about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 stitches long, and of course I have 350 stitches, so you do the math. But I'm really pleased with how this is coming out. I'm pleased that I managed to knit as much as I have already. I think I'm about 12,000 stitches in so far, which is not bad considering I only started working on it on Wednesday. And my plan is to take this with me to Thanksgiving and do some cranking, not cranking like a sock machine, but cranking like a lot of knitting while we are in the car. So that is that one. The next project, which I have designated a home project for a variety of reasons, which will soon become apparent, is an alpaca beaded shawl. So I am working on updating a sample for the online shawl, which was published by Woolly Wonka Fibers in the Filament Fibers magazine, and now she is going to re-release it in a different yarn, and so she asked if I would knit up the sample for her. And what she sent me were 3 skeins of yarn, and it is, I talked about this last week, it is Ramagarn Alpaca Lin, which I believe is an alpaca core with wool and linen, and it looks like this. She sent me 3 colorways because we're doing this sort of as a gradient. The first was kind of a white, and then the second was a really, really light silvery gray, and then the third is this kind of medium gray. And at first I thought they were too subtle and I wasn't sure I was going to like it, but now I actually really like the contrast on it. So this week, my big crowning achievement is that I finished the center panel. This is one of those shawls that has knit with a center panel and then worked out from each side. And the central panel is a big lace chart that produces a square, and has quite a few beads. And so this was definitely a home knitting project because I needed to keep a very close eye on the chart and keep an eye on the beads. So this is the center portion, and as you can see, it is a really nice kind of geometric, lots of lines and kind of mitered corners, and then there are also lots and lots of beads. So this is going to end up kind of ethereal and sparkly, and I am pretty pleased with it. I will say I was a little bit nervous about the combination of the alpaca and beads, and I can't remember what Rama is classified as. It says 18 to, that's weird. I think 16 to 18 stitches per 10 centimeters, which puts it at, I guess, about a worsted gauge, 4 stitches to the inch. And I am using size 6 needles, and I am getting about 4 stitches to the inch. And then the beads that I am using were provided by her. They are Rokai by Miyuki of Japan, and they are silver-lined crystal beads. And so these are what I'm using, and this shawl is worked in the crochet beaded method. So I put beads on the loops using a crochet hook. Again, why it's a home project. This I worked on most of the week at home, and like I said, I was pleased to finish the square, and then I picked up on one side of the shawl. One side is now on waste yarn, and the other side of the shawl I have started and done the first chart for this side of the shawl. I have another section about as long and wide as this one to finish in the light gray, and then I have another section that's slightly longer to do in the dark gray. And so that is what I will be working on this week. My hope is to finish this before I leave for Thanksgiving, and I am leaving on Friday, November 22nd. I don't know that I'd have time to block it before then, but I would really like to knock this out because I don't want to take this in the car with me, see aforementioned lace, charts, and beads, and I would really like to do this from the comfort of my own home where I can set myself up and not lose a million beads in the couch or in the car. So that's the plan. My plan is to work on the next section of this tonight and hopefully finish it, and then do the following section over the next couple nights, and then go back and do the other side, and bada bing, bada boom, and hopefully we're done. So I really am enjoying knitting with this yarn. I will say that personally I cannot wear alpaca, particularly around my neck. I unfortunately am a special snowflake, and my skin just does not like it. And as soft as it feels in my hands, and I do not mind knitting with it or spinning with it because I love the feel in my hands, every time I put something on, I just want to itch with the fire of 1,000 suns. That said, I suspect this as a shawl worn over something else would probably be fine with me, and it has a beautifully soft hand. The other thing I will say is that for as fluffy as it is, and as much of a halo as it has, and as annoying as it is to have to rip if you make a mistake, it is not shedding. I get up from working on it and I do not have alpaca fibers all over me, and I do not have fluffs of alpaca fiber in the air as I am working. And to me, that is a huge positive because I was actually wondering if some of my sinuses and some of that kind of stuff had to do with the fibers I brought into the house, because my husband actually shows some allergies to fibers, but this just isn't going anywhere. So I kind of don't think it's any relation to what I'm doing. So that is what I'm working on and will be working on, and the pattern will re-release, my guess is sometime in December or January. We're going to make a couple small modifications to it, I think, based on color changes and some of those kinds of things, but nothing significant, and it's actually been a real pleasure to knit this. So, because I will say I agreed to do it, and then when it arrived in the mail, I was like, uh-oh, what have I gotten myself into? I don't knit as much lace anymore, and I definitely don't usually knit fuzzy lace, but this has actually turned out to be just fine. With a couple exceptions where I had to rip a couple rows to fix a mistake, it's actually been very easy. The pattern is very intuitive. So this is the Onlay Shawl by Anne Podlesak, who is Woolly Wonka Fibers, and it is available now for purchase in a different yarn through Filament Fibers, but it will also be a re-release through Anne Podlesak's store soon. So there you go. So the third project that I cast on this week is on my never-ending list of things to do for the children, and I embarrassingly did not get very far, although part of that is that, do you ever start a project and you're supposed to use two sizes, usually a hat or mittens or something like that, and you're supposed to use one needle for the ribbing, and then you're supposed to go up 2 needle sizes, or, up a couple needle sizes to work on the body. Sometimes some people who are not paying attention forget to do that and knit the whole mitten and then have to rip it out. And I kept knitting that mitten thinking it looked really, really small and not really able to figure out where I had gone wrong. So, this is technically the second mitten that I have knit. I am knitting Miles some antler mittens, and he is still pretty tiny, so I'm basically using the toddler size, and this is what I have so far. I have a few more pattern repeats before I do the top of the mitten, then there'll be the thumb, and then I will do an, oops, I'm missing a needle. Let's put those stitches back on the needle, because I don't want to lose those. Then I will do an I-cord, flip on over to the other mitten, and then these will be done, and I need to take these with me to Thanksgiving. So this is the last of the things that I feel like I absolutely have to have done before Thanksgiving, because I have hat and mittens for his sister, and it's getting cold. It's already snowing in Chicago. So my plan is to try and knock these out in the next week or two. Worst case, I will take them in the car with me. And then the only other thing I thought about for them, and I did buy some worsted weight yarn this weekend, was to knit them each a pair of quick slippers. And they are just little moccasin style slippers. I have knit them before, and so I have a skein of worsted weight yarn in a dark gray that I bought from a friend, and my plan is to probably just take that in the car with me. And then make them a few fun, brightly colored pom-poms here, and then I can just knit real quick and assemble in the car. Each slipper takes me about an hour, because they're super quick knits on, worsted for a kid who's 3 years old, not much of a knit. So, and then I think I will be roughly ready for gifting season. Again, my family only sees each other at Thanksgiving. We spend Christmas with our respective in-laws, so I usually try and get the kids holiday packages together for Hanukkah, which we usually celebrate during Thanksgiving, whether it happens during then or not. So Antler Mittens by Tin Can Knits. It's a cute little pattern. I have knit it before, and they will match his hat, which I have showed you previously, which is the antler hat. So, and the yarn is Primrose Fiber Co. Duchess in the Sinatra colorway. It is her worsted weight superwash merino, definitely machine washable for little boys. So that is on the needles this week. So those are my 3 projects. I have another sample coming, which will definitely go with me on vacation, and I have some contract spinning to do. So those are all keeping me quite busy. So a quick sip of tea, and then I will show you a couple spinning things, and then we will move on. One more bit of administrative. I have opened the November gift along in the group. That is a craft along open to anyone, any craft. All you need to do is make a gift for someone else, whether it be a holiday season gift or a just a birthday gift or just a just because gift. The only rule is that it cannot be for you, and well, I should say the only rules are it cannot be for you. It needs to be completed during November 1st through December 31st, and you cannot have more than half done before you start. So if you knit one sock and you just have to knit a second sock to make a pair for someone for Christmas, go for it. Totally counts. You may double, triple dip, quadruple dip, quintuple dip, whatever you want with all the other alongs that are going on right now. And just post your finished objects. You can have as many entries as you have finished objects, and there will be prizes, although I have not pulled those yet. So, spinning. I realized that I actually did not really spin a skein of yarn in October because I actually started the last skein of yarn in September. Clearly spinning has taken a backseat to all the knitting that I am doing, and a lot of it is contract work, so I have been earning some money and keeping myself busy. I'm actually going to take my slippers off because all of a sudden the heat kicked in and now I am super warm. What I was wearing these are the Inglenook. I believe they are actually intended to be socks, but I made mine slippers. They are by Adrian Bazilla, who is Hello Yarn. And what I did is I went and ordered some suede slipper soles and went ahead and added them. And I was wearing them over my socks, but now I am like totally overheated. I believe I knit these years and years ago with stuff that was in my stash. I actually think it's Hobby Lobby's I Love This Yarn, which is 100% wool. Not that I would necessarily recommend shopping at Hobby Lobby because I do not approve of a lot of their business practices. However, that is what these are, and I knit them ages ago, and they only get pulled out on the coldest days because they are super warm. So now I'm overheating. I have this weird thing. Everybody has weird things. I have this weird thing where if my feet are hot, the rest of me are hot. The rest of me is hot. I know some people have like hats, or if my feet are hot, the rest of me overheats and I feel terrible. So I just had to get them off my feet. But those will go over here for the next time that it is super cold. Okay, for realsies, now spinning. For the month of October, I worked diligently on some fiber that I had been hoarding from Crown Mountain Fiber, and they are sadly no longer in business. They went out of business quite a while ago, and they had lovely fibers. What I spun was Falkland in the Stonehenge colorway, and it was blues and greens and purples and some browns, and what I ended up with is fairly mottled, which I'm not sure what I expected to end up with, but it's a little more mottled than I would like, so I suspect that this might go up in the shop. It is a lovely yarn, but you can see that there are browns and greens and then a few spots of, that there are blues and greens and then a few spots of yellow and brown, and then where is, like this one right here, you can see there's like a little bit of lavender in there, and I guess the camera is showing a significant amount of variation, but it's not quite, as bright as I was hoping for, which I don't think it was ever going to be super bright. The way I spun this one is it came in basically pin drafted roving, which is roving that has, I think it's actually been dizzed, which is they take the fiber and they run it through some kind of form that has a hole in it. And the size of the hole is the size of the width of the fiber. And so what they do is they pull it through that hole to make thin strips of fiber. So what I was spinning with was, not pin drafted roving, pencil roving. So the thickness was probably about this big, and I just spun straight through from end to end because the color repeats were not that long because it was because it was set up in very thin strips. It actually was one continuous strip all the way through, and by the time I was done, I ended up with 7.5 ounces, and I have not actually done the weight and yardage since I washed it, but I know that before I washed it and it snugged up, so I would expect to lose a considerable amount. I had almost 500 wraps, which theoretically is 500 wraps times 2 times 36 inches, or a yard, 1,000 yards. My guess is I ended up with I usually end up with shrinkage of about 80%. So my guess is I've got close to 800 yards here. My guess is it varies between a sport weight and a worsted weight because it was not my most consistent spinning, but it is lovely. It is not, however, superwash. So this would make a lovely shawl, but unfortunately, unless you have someone who's going to take really good care of it, it would not be best for small children who might need it washed fairly frequently. That said, if you have someone who loves wool, you could totally use it for that. So that one should go up in the shop shortly after this episode, possibly tomorrow, and it's there if it floats your boat. I was going for a combination of strikes your fancy and floats your boat, and I was going to say strikes your boat, but that doesn't mean anything. So there you go. The spinning that I'm doing this week. So last week I talked about how I was knitting for the City Girl Farm and knitting chicken feathers. And I went in last week and she told me that they did not have any more yarn for me to knit up. But she said, I know you're a spinner. Would you be interested in spinning? And the last couple times that I have spun, it's been with incredibly thick and thin yarn, what I would usually refer to as art yarn. Not in a derogatory way, but my way of spinning is I use a short forward draw, which results in a very consistent yarn and a very worsted spun yarn, which is, it's kind of dense and it's kind of uniform. And they were using more of a thick and thin, which usually requires a lighter hand and oftentimes is spun woolen with lots of air in the fiber, although some of the fibers that I spun actually were kind of dense, or knit with, were kind of dense. But this week they asked me if I would be interested in spinning some fiber. And I said, I don't know that I can do the kind of spinning that you guys do. And she said, well, actually, we're looking for something different. They are looking to create a chicken that does not have all the crazy large garter stitch and whatever, but is more a small kind of pinstriped chicken. And so they are looking for a fairly consistent yarn to be spun at a fairly consistent gauge and then knit up in a variety of feathers and coats and tail pieces, and it's got a million pieces to put together. It's amazing. I will show you a photograph of one. Well, actually, I have my phone here, so let's see if I can find it. Hang on. The chicken that we're spinning for is... I forgot to log back in. Hopefully that won't take too long. Let's see. I know it's very exciting watching you watch me. The chicken in question is... I know there's one here because I just showed someone. Okay, this is... He is named Duke, and he is a specific breed of chicken, and I do not remember the breed of chicken, but he was done with very stripy knits, and you can see, and all of those feathers are like individual feathers or stacked pieces, and then he's got all those tail feathers. He was designed to look a lot like a one of the fancy exotic breeds of chickens. Anyway, so they're asking me to spin for yarn for this one. So I will say this is a challenging spin for me because I am not as rooted in technique. I'm a self-taught spinner. I have taken some classes, but in general, I do not spin to specification, as it were. A lot of times I let the fiber do what it wants to do and be what it wants to be, and then when I'm done with it, I pick a project. So I don't make use of things like spinner control cards and comparing it to commercial weight yarns, etc., etc. So this week I have 2 colors of fiber. They're not super exciting, but they are this gorgeous lightning white, which is going to blow out the screen, and this dark mocha. And so it's brown and white, and I am going to be spinning. These are each almost a pound, and then I actually have 2 more bags. So I am going to need to experiment with spinning some yarn that meets their specifications. Now, the head knitter did tell me approximately what size needle she used and what size yarn she is looking for, and I do have a small sample of the knitting that went into that. So I think I'm targeting between a DK weight and a worsted weight, and so what I plan to do is pull those things as well as a couple skeins of commercial worsted weight and a spinner's control card, which I do not have here with me, but I will bring it with me and talk about it next week. The spinner's control card, well, okay. There is, actually what I'm talking about is a WPI tool, which is, for spinners, it is a, I have a small plexiglass, it's got a lanyard on it, but a small, or a badge holder on it. It's a small plexiglass item that has lines marked on it, and the lines indicate how many wraps, the thickness of the line indicates how many wraps per inch you will get. And standard yarn weights like fingering, sport, DK, worsted have a suggested WPI, wraps per inch gauge. And so by holding your yarn up to those lines and seeing how your yarn sits on the line, like is it too big for the line? Is it too small for the line? Is it right about right? You can't see the line, but it's right there. That tells you roughly what weight you are spinning. Spinning control cards are where you take a little bit of yarn that you have spun or a little bit of your sample yarn and you tie it to a card. Usually people just use index cards, and punch a hole in them and loop some of the yarn that they're trying to approximate through there. And then they spin a sample of yarn and they add a little sample, just a couple yards, just a yard or two of the yarn that they spun to that card. And then as they go throughout the project, they may continue adding every, 4 ounces or whatnot, they may continue adding to that card. But they also keep that card next to where they're spinning. So every few minutes you can grab that card and hold it up against what you're spinning and make sure that you are still kind of staying on task and producing roughly an even yarn that meets those specifications. So I know all about the theory of this, but I have not done it before. So that is what I'm going to do this week, and I will report back next week with the results of that. My plan is to maybe do a little spinning tonight, but tomorrow, my husband is always out on Tuesday nights, so my plan is to sit in front of the wheel tomorrow and experiment quite a bit, and then this project really needs to be finished before I leave, because although I do have a mini spinner, I haven't decided whether I'm going to spin this on the mini spinner, because I love my mini spinner, but and you can adjust the level of take up, but you lose a lot of the minute adjustments that you can make when you can actually treadle and draft and control like all the bits and pieces of what goes into making a yarn. So I haven't completely decided, but I'm thinking about pulling out my treadle wheel, which is an Ask for Joy. I haven't had that out in a while. And working on this project there, so I have a little bit more control over what I am creating. My concern on the electric spinner is that I sort of have a default weight on the electric spinner that I go to, that I just kind of, plug in and watch a movie and spin, and I come out at roughly a certain weight, and that is not the weight that I'm looking for. So I really want to avoid ending up there. And not that you cannot... It is not the wheel that determines what you get. It really is the skill of the spinner. But since this is a skill that I do not practice a ton, in my knowledge, I feel like I can control the wheel better if I have control over the treadle. So that's the experiment for this week. Tune in next week to hear how it went. Like I said, it's something a little different and interesting for me, and I feel like I'm going to know pretty quickly whether I can do it or not. Because I'm either going to get the samples that I want or I'm not. And if I do not get the samples that I want, I'm going to take it back to them and tell them that I don't think I'm the right spinner for this, because this is their livelihood and part of being a contractor, and I try not to back out of jobs very often, but part of being a contractor is knowing your own limits and being truthful with your clients and telling them when you are not the right person for the job. They will trust that in the long run more than if you take materials from them and produce a substandard or unusable product. So that's my little tip if you're ever knitting or spinning for other people. So, I have talked your ear off for almost 35 minutes, and I really didn't even think I had that much to say. I hope you have a lovely week of crafting. We have one more week of our regular programming, and then, no, I take it back. We have 2 more weeks. Never mind, we have 2 more weeks of regular programming, and then I will take a brief break over the Thanksgiving holiday, although I will probably film a few bits while I am on my travels. And I hopefully will return home with tons of things to show you. But again, I still have a couple more weeks before that happens. So I'd love to see you join our craft along. And if you're knitting a sweater, you're welcome to join the Nanny Swimo group. Check that out and see what it's all about. And until I see you next time, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.